knew the moment I dragged that strange egg into my bedroom that this was a terrible idea. It was too heavy, too cold, too unnatural. And before I could even decide what to do with it, the shell began to tremble. Then it cracked open, and a baby Godzilla crawled out onto my bedroom floor. Not a random lizard, not a made-up reptile. I mean Godzilla. A tiny version of the monster itself. Dark charcoal reptilian skin, thick rough scales, a heavy tail already dragging behind him, short but powerful legs, small muscular arms with sharp claws, a broad reptilian face, alert predatory eyes, and jagged dorsal plates running down his back. He was small, but he did not feel harmless. That was the strange part. He was still little enough to stand beside my bed. Still little enough to fit near the wall. Still little enough to make the entire situation feel weirdly manageable. But even at that size, he already looked dense. Like he weighed much more than he should have. Like there was far too much power packed into that small body. My bedroom looked completely normal around him. Wooden floor. Standard bed on the left side. A desk on the right side. A chair near the desk. Warm lamps glowing in the corners. Plain walls. A normal lived-in room. Except now there was a baby Godzilla standing in the middle of it. At first he did not panic. He did not run. He did not attack. He just looked around. First at the bed, then at the desk, then at the wall, then at me. And the way he stared made me uncomfortable immediately. Not because he looked confused, because he looked aware. Like he was already studying the room. Studying me. Trying to understand where he had hatched and what was standing in front of him. I should have backed away right then. I should have gotten rid of him right then. But instead, I did what people always do when something dangerous starts small. I treated him like a pet. I gave him water. I gave him soft food. I cleared a small space for him near the wall, and by the end of the first hour, he already seemed calmer. That was enough to trick me. He followed movement with his eyes. He reacted to sound. He turned his head whenever I crossed the room. When I sat down near him, he did not retreat. A few times he even stepped closer on his own. That made everything worse. Because the second a creature like that starts acting calm, your brain starts making excuses for it. Maybe he could bond. Maybe he could adapt. Maybe a baby Godzilla would be dangerous in theory, but manageable in practice. That was the lie. The first sign that something was wrong came sooner than I expected. He was growing, not slowly, not over weeks, not even over days. By the end of that same night, he was already visibly larger. His neck looked thicker, his tail looked longer, his claws looked sharper, his legs looked heavier, and his dorsal plates looked more pronounced. The room already felt smaller. That same normal bedroom with the wooden floor, the bed, the desk, the chair, and the warm lamps was starting to feel like the wrong place for him. I had more food in the room, more water, more mess, and a lot more concern. He started moving around more confidently. He stopped looking like a hatchling and started looking like a young predator. He nudged objects with his snout. He scratched the wooden floor with his claws. He pushed into the chair hard enough to move it. He climbed partly onto the bed like he was testing everything around him. And every hour he looked bigger. That was when I noticed something else. A faint blue glow. At first I thought I imagined it. A tiny pulse deep in his throat. Then another. Then a dim blue light reflecting across his teeth. That was the moment my stomach dropped. Because this was not just some giant reptile. This was Godzilla. And if that was true, then I was not dealing with a weird pet. I was dealing with a future catastrophe. By the next morning, the change was impossible to ignore. He was no longer small enough to dismiss. He was already large enough to crowd the space between the bed and the desk. Large enough to force the chair backward. Large enough to leave deep claw marks in the floorboards. Large enough that when he turned, his tail hit the side of the desk. He was growing too fast, much too fast. And the worst part was that he seemed stronger every time I looked at him. His body was getting wider. His shoulders were getting heavier. His legs were becoming thicker and more grounded. His tail had become a weapon all by itself. And those jagged dorsal plates along his spine no longer looked decorative. They looked dangerous. Then the energy started building again. This time it was obvious. A blue glow spread through his throat. The dorsal plates along his back began to light up, one by one. A cold, electric-looking radiance ran from his spine toward his mouth. I froze. He opened his jaws, and a short blast of blue atomic breath shot across the room. It was not huge, not yet, but it was more than enough. Part of the wooden floor blackened instantly. The lower edge of the wall was scorched. The air turned hot and sharp and chemical. That was the first moment I felt real fear. Because now there was no pretending anymore. I was not looking at a strange baby animal. I was looking at a smaller version of something built for destruction. Something that had only seemed manageable because it had started tiny. That is how creatures like this fool people. When they begin small, people confuse size with safety. They confuse early calmness with trust. They confuse temporary control with ownership. But a creature like Godzilla is not safe just because it is young. It is dangerous from the start. The growth only reveals it. By the second day, the bedroom had stopped feeling like a bedroom. The floor was scratched and scorched. The chair was out of place. The desk had been hit more than once. Small items had fallen everywhere. The air smelled like heat, smoke, and dust. And Godzilla had become too large for the room much faster than anything should. I tried to calm him. I tried feeding him more. I tried moving objects to make more space. I tried controlling the environment around him. But the truth was obvious. He was not adapting to the room. The room was failing to contain him, and he was still growing. Every few hours, the difference was visible. A bigger torso, longer tail, stronger limbs, larger claws, taller dorsal plates, more energy building in his throat. The hatchling look disappeared fast. Not because he became ugly, because he became undeniable. You can call something adorable when it first crawls out of an egg. It becomes much harder to call it adorable when it is clawing through your room and charging atomic breath beside your bed. By the time the second night hit, the room was wrecked. The bed had been pushed out of place. The desk had been damaged. The chair had been knocked aside. The wooden floor was torn up. And Godzilla had become so large that every movement felt like it belonged to something that should never have been indoors. Then he broke through. First came the impact, then the cracking of wood, then the snap of wall framing giving way, and then suddenly the creature that had crawled out of that egg in my bedroom was no longer in the room at all. He was in the building, and only seconds later he was outside. That was when everything changed, because inside the room he had looked contained. Outside he looked right. Out in the open he grew even faster, like the city had finally given him enough space. His body expanded, his tail dragged across the street, his legs became like pillars, his arms thickened, his dorsal plates rose higher, and the blue glow inside his throat became brighter and more violent. At first, people on the street did not even understand what they were seeing. Cars slowed down. Pedestrians stopped. Phones came out. For a few seconds, it was just confusion. Then the panic started, because Godzilla kept growing. He rose above traffic, then above the storefronts, then above the nearby buildings. And every time he grew, the destruction got worse. Cars were crushed, streetlights bent, glass shattered, storefronts collapsed, concrete cracked. People ran in every direction, and through all of it, he kept building energy. Then the atomic breath came again. This time, it was not a short blast. It was a devastating beam. A bright blue stream of destructive energy ripping across the street. It tore through vehicles. It blasted apart the front of buildings. It lit the smoke like lightning. It turned a city block into a disaster zone in seconds. That was when I understood the real difference between this story and every stupid fantasy people imagine about keeping monsters as pets. A real pet becomes part of your home. Something like Godzilla destroys the idea of home completely, because once a creature like that starts growing, nothing around it stays normal. Not your room, not your building, not your street, not your city. By then, he was already towering over apartment blocks. His dorsal plates rose above rooftops. His head lifted higher than the surrounding buildings, his tail carved through the street behind him, and his atomic breath lit the city like an artificial storm. At that point, this was not a pet story anymore. It was not even just a monster story, it was a city-level catastrophe. Roads were filled with rubble. Vehicles were crushed flat. Buildings were burning. Smoke filled the air. Emergency lights flashed across broken glass and drifting dust. And in the middle of it stood the creature I had once thought I could keep in my bedroom. That contrast is what makes the whole thing terrifying, because it started with something small. A hatchling beside a broken egg. A strange creature on a wooden floor. A monster that still looked manageable for a few minutes. And then it became Godzilla in the only way that truly matters. Too big. Too strong, too destructive, too powerful to stop. That is the real lesson here. Some creatures do not become dangerous later, they begin dangerous. We just fail to recognize it while they are still small. And Godzilla is exactly that kind of creature. It may hatch in your room. It may seem calm for a little while. It may even look like it recognizes you. It may feel like the rarest creature you could ever imagine keeping. Fascinating, powerful, unbelievable, but not safe. Never safe. Because with something like Godzilla, growth is not just growth. It is escalation. Every increase in size means more strength, more reach, more damage, more risk. And once that process starts, it does not end in companionship. It ends in destruction. So would keeping a baby Godzilla as a pet in real life feel amazing at first? Honestly, yes, for a moment. Maybe for an hour. Maybe for part of a day, but after that? No chance. Because the moment that egg opens, the countdown has already started. And once he becomes what he was always meant to become, you are not raising a pet. You are raising a disaster. You are raising a living weapon. You are raising a monster that will outgrow your room, your building, and then your entire city. So, no. If a baby Godzilla existed in real life, I would never keep it. Because when something dangerous starts small, people make the worst mistake possible. They mistake small for safe. And Godzilla proves exactly why that mistake can destroy everything. If it starts in your bedroom, it will not stay there. If it looks manageable, that will not last. And if it hatches at all, the disaster has already begun.